if you wakes up, everything falls apart.
If you wake up, the woman whispered, everything falls apart. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Nothing in the world seemed wrong, but everything was. Ethan Vale lay frozen in the hospital bed, eyes closed, body still, breathing shallow. He could hear every word. Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The voice near his ear was calm, too calm, like someone reading off a checklist. But if you don't wake up, she continued, leaning closer, the money disappears, the questions die, and the story ends clean. Ethan's mind screamed, move, blink, do something. Nothing happened. His fingers wouldn't twitch, his eyelids wouldn't lift, his throat wouldn't swallow. He was trapped inside his own body, and she knew it. I'll make sure you never know what really happened. The words hit him like ice water. Who was this? The voice didn't belong to his wife. It wasn't Clarice's soft, polished tone. It wasn't her expensive perfume filling the air. It was someone else, someone who had been invisible for years. McKenna, the maid, the quiet black woman who cleaned his house, who never raised her voice, who always answered with, yes, sir, and of course, ma'am. The one who moved through rooms like a shadow, and now she was standing over him, speaking like she owned the entire situation. Ethan tried again to move. A finger, a toe, anything, nothing. Panic clawed at his chest. McKenna stood up slowly, smoothing the hospital blanket like she'd just finished making a bed. Professional. Precise. She walked toward the door without looking back. Her footsteps were soft, controlled. The door clicked shut behind her. Silence. Ethan's heart pounded against his ribs. The monitor beeped faster, just slightly. He replayed her words in his mind. Money. Questions. Secrets. Clean endings. What did she mean? Why would a maid who barely spoke suddenly talk like she was holding all the cards? And who was she really talking to? Ethan Vale was a billionaire, a CEO, a man who controlled supply chains that fed half the country. People depended on him, respected him, feared him. But right now, lying in this bed, he was helpless. And McKenna knew it. She believed he couldn't hear, couldn't understand, couldn't fight back. So she finally let the truth slip. But what truth? Ethan forced himself to think clearly through the fog of fear. 11 years. That's how long McKenna had worked in his home. 11 years of quiet cleaning, quiet cooking, quiet watching. He barely remembered hiring her. Clarice handled the staff. McKenna came through some agency in Maryland. No drama, no complaints, no demands. She just worked, or so he thought. Now trapped in this hospital bed, Ethan realized something terrifying. McKenna had been listening the whole time, watching, waiting. And now, with him lying here like a corpse, she was finally talking. The heart monitor beeped on. Ethan couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't warn anyone. All he could do was lie there and wonder. What was McKenna planning? What did she know? And who else was involved? The questions burned in his mind. Outside the door, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Voices murmured. Life went on. But inside this room, Ethan Vale was alone, awake, aware, and absolutely terrified. Because the woman who just walked out wasn't just a maid. She was someone who knew exactly what she was doing, and she thought he'd never wake up to stop her. Why would a quiet maid speak like she controlled everything? Before the crash, Ethan Vale was the kind of man most people never noticed, but everyone depended on him. His logistics company moved food across America. Medicine, fuel, the things that kept cities alive. If his system stopped, grocery shelves would empty within days. Hospitals would feel it. Gas stations would run dry. Ethan didn't chase fame. He chased control. and he was very good at it. At home, his wife Clarice handled the spotlight. She loved it. Charity galas, museum boards, magazine covers. She knew how to smile for cameras, how to cry at the right moments, how to look devastated without ruining her makeup. People believed every word she said. Ethan used to think that was love. Now, lying in this hospital bed, he wasn't so sure. Clarice was beautiful, polished, perfect in public. But behind closed doors, she was cold. She asked questions that sounded normal at first, until they piled up. Questions about money, about access, about what would happen if he wasn't around. Ethan always answered. He thought he was protecting things. Now he wondered if he'd been handing her the keys. And then there was McKenna, the maid. 11 years ago, Clarice hired her through some agency in Maryland. Ethan barely remembered the interview. McKenna was quiet, professional. She never asked for anything. No social media, no drama, no extra conversations. She just worked, or at least that's what Ethan thought. For the first few months, he didn't even notice her. She moved through the house like air, present but invisible. Then he started seeing patterns, small things. McKenna always arrived right before arguments ended, like she knew when to show up. She always left after the silence settled, never during the storm. She knew where things were without being told, what Ethan liked, what Clarice needed. It was efficient, helpful, but also strange. One afternoon, Ethan came out of his office and found McKenna standing in the hallway. Just standing there, near his door, not cleaning, not moving, just still, like she'd been listening. Ethan stopped, stared at her. "Do you need something?" he asked. McKenna turned, calm as ever, and smiled softly. "No, sir," she said. "I'm just working." Then she walked away. Ethan didn't think much of it at the time, but now, trapped in this hospital bed, that moment replayed in his mind. We all have someone we stopped seeing. Maybe it's time we started looking. McKenna had been in his house for 11 years. 11 years of watching, listening, learning. She knew his schedule, his habits, his weaknesses. She knew when Clarice was angry, when Ethan was stressed, when fights were coming. She saw everything. And Ethan had never once asked why. He never wondered what she thought, what she noticed, what she knew. She was just the maid. Invisible, safe, wrong. Ethan's chest tightened under the hospital blanket. What had McKenna been collecting all these years? Was it information? Secrets? Evidence? Or something worse? Ethan tried to remember other moments, other signs. There was the time Clarice screamed at him about a business deal. McKenna had been in the next room, folding laundry. She didn't react, didn't leave, just kept folding, like she was used to it, or like she was taking notes. There was the night Ethan found documents missing from his office. Nothing major, just files he couldn't find. Clarice said she hadn't touched them. McKenna said she'd cleaned but hadn't moved anything. The files showed up 2 days later, back where they belonged. Ethan never questioned it. Maybe he should have. Now, lying here paralyzed, he realized something terrifying. McKenna had access to everything. His office, his phone, his private conversations. She was always there, always quiet, always watching, and he never once thought she mattered. Ethan's mind raced. What if McKenna wasn't just a maid? What if she'd been planted, sent by someone? What if she'd been waiting for the right moment to strike? Or worse, what if she'd been waiting for him to become helpless? The accident, the crash on that wet Pennsylvania highway, was it really an accident? Ethan's pulse jumped. The heart monitor beeped faster. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to stay calm. If the nurses noticed the monitor spike, they'd come in. They'd ask questions, and McKenna might find out he was awake. He couldn't risk that. Not yet. Ethan needed time. Time to think. Time to understand. Time to figure out who Makina really was and what she wanted. Because the woman who whispered in his ear wasn't a maid. She was someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Someone who had been planning this for a long time. Someone who believed Ethan would never wake up to stop her. But he was awake. And now he had to survive long enough to find out the truth. The door to his hospital room opened softly. Footsteps. Light. Familiar. McKenna. Ethan's heart pounded. She walked to the side of his bed. He could feel her presence. She didn't speak, just stood there, watching, waiting, like she was checking something. Then she reached out. Her fingers brushed the blanket near his hand. Ethan fought every instinct to flinch. Stay still. Stay calm. McKenna adjusted the pillow under his head, smoothed the sheet. Her movements were gentle, professional, but her silence was loud. After a moment, she stepped back and walked out. The door clicked shut. Ethan exhaled slowly, his mind spinning. What was Makina collecting all these years, and what was she planning to do with it now? Clarice changed slowly, so slowly that Ethan didn't notice until it was too late. It started about 6 months before the accident. Small questions, innocent at first. What happens if you're not here to sign something important? Ethan looked up from his laptop. What do you mean? Clarice smiled softly. I'm just thinking ahead. What if you're traveling? Or sick? Who takes over? My lawyers handle it, Ethan said. There are protocols. She nodded, kissed his cheek. Just making sure we're prepared. It seemed reasonable. A week later, she asked another question. Who has access to the foundation accounts? Ethan was in the kitchen, pouring coffee. Just me. Why? No reason, Clarice said lightly. I was talking to someone at the gala. They mentioned how important it is to have backup access, in case something happens. Ethan shrugged. Everything's locked behind my approval. It's safer that way. Clarice nodded again, smiled again. Then she walked away with her phone already in her hand. Ethan didn't think much of it, but the questions kept coming. Why is everything tied to your signature? What if there's an emergency and you can't respond? Shouldn't someone else have access, just in case? Each time, Ethan answered logically, calmly. He thought he was protecting their assets, keeping things secure. Now, lying in this hospital bed, he realized he'd been handing her a map to everything he controlled. Clarice never asked the same question twice. She was smart about it. She spread them out, weeks apart, always casual, always loving. And every time Ethan answered, she kissed him, touched his arm, smiled like a devoted wife. Then she'd disappear into another room, and her fingers would fly across her phone screen, texting someone. Always someone. Ethan saw it once. He didn't think to ask who. He trusted her. Big mistake. McKenna watched all of it. She never stepped into their conversations. Never interrupted. Never offered opinions. She moved through the house like she wasn't even there. But she was always close enough to hear. Always close enough to see. One night, Ethan came downstairs for water. It was late. Past midnight. The house was dark except for a soft glow from the living room. Clarice's voice floated out. Low. Sharp. Ethan stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Not yet, Clarice said. He's still in the way. Ethan's blood went cold. He stepped closer. Quietly. Clarice was on the phone, pacing near the window, her back to him. I know, she hissed, but I can't move anything while he's watching. He controls everything. Silence. Then, I'm handling it. Just give me time. Ethan's heart pounded. Who was she talking to? And what did she mean by in the way? He stepped back into the hallway, trying to process what he'd just heard. That's when he saw her. Makina, standing in the hallway near the laundry room, holding a basket of folded towels, staring at nothing. Ethan's throat tightened. He walked over to her, keeping his voice low. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. McKenna turned her head slowly. Her face was calm, unreadable. "Sir?" she said softly. "Clarice," Ethan said. "On the phone. Did you hear what she said?" McKenna looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Some words aren't meant to be repeated, sir." Ethan froze. "What does that mean?" he asked, but McKenna just adjusted the laundry basket in her arms. "Good night, sir," she said. And she walked away. Ethan stood there in the dark hallway, his mind racing. McKenna heard it. He knew she did. So why didn't she react? Why didn't she look surprised or concerned? Why did she act like she already knew? Ethan didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed next to Clarice, staring at the ceiling. She came upstairs an hour later, slipped under the covers, kissed his shoulder. "Good night, baby," she whispered. Ethan didn't answer. He just lay there, replaying the words in his head. He's still in the way. The next morning, Clarice acted like nothing happened. She made coffee, asked about his meetings, smiled like always. Ethan watched her closely, searching for cracks, for signs. But Clarice was perfect, too perfect. And McKenna? McKenna moved through the kitchen like a ghost, cleaning, organizing, saying nothing. But when Ethan caught her eye, just for a second, he saw something. Recognition. Like she knew exactly what he was thinking. And she wasn't going to help him. Ethan started paying attention after that night. He noticed how Clarice's questions became more urgent, how her smiles became tighter, how she checked her phone constantly. And he noticed McKenna, always nearby, always watching, never speaking unless spoken to, but always there. One afternoon, Ethan walked into his office and found his desk drawer slightly open. He always locked it, always. He checked the contents. Nothing seemed missing, but someone had been in there. He walked out into the hallway. McKenna was dusting a picture frame near the stairs. "McKenna," Ethan said. She turned. "Yes, sir." "Did you clean my office today?" "Yes, sir," she said calmly. "Did you touch my desk?" McKenna's face didn't change. "I dusted around it, sir. I didn't open anything." Ethan studied her. She didn't blink. Didn't look away. "All right," he said finally. "Thank you." McKenna nodded and went back to dusting. Ethan stood there, watching her. Something was wrong. He could feel it, but he couldn't prove it. And the more he tried to figure it out, the more tangled everything became. Clarice was hiding something. McKenna was hiding something. And Ethan was standing in the middle, blind to the truth. Until the accident. Until the crash that put him in this hospital bed. Until he woke up trapped in his own body and heard McKenna whisper the words that changed everything. Now, lying here, Ethan replayed that night over and over. He's still in the way. Who was Clarice talking to? And why did McKenna act like she already knew? The crash happened on a wet Pennsylvania highway just outside Pittsburgh. Ethan insisted on driving himself that night. He needed quiet, space, time to think. Too many questions, too many lies. The rain came down hard. Visibility was terrible. He should have pulled over. He didn't. Then the semi-truck swerved. No warning, no time. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. The world spun violently, twisting Ethan's body against the seatbelt. His head slammed against something hard. Pain erupted, then nothing. Time fractured. Ethan didn't know how long he was out. Seconds? Minutes? When sound came back, it was sirens. Distant at first, then close. Too close. Voices shouted. Hands pulled at his door. He's breathing. Barely. Get him out, now. Paramedics worked fast. They cut the seatbelt, pulled him from the wreckage. They didn't know who he was, didn't care. To them, he was just another man bleeding on the side of the highway. They fought for him like he mattered, because he did. Even if he was a billionaire, even if his name moved markets, in that moment he was just a body that needed saving. And they saved him. The ambulance rushed him to the hospital. Doctors swarmed. Machines beeped. Needles went in. Someone made a call. Within an hour, the news broke. Billionaire Ethan Vale in critical condition. America woke up to the story. The man who controlled supply chains across the country was fighting for his life. And his wife was on her way. Clarice arrived at the hospital with cameras chasing her. She stumbled out of the car, heels clicking on wet pavement. Her face was perfect. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her makeup stayed flawless. She clutched her handbag like it was the only thing holding her together. Reporters called out questions. "Mrs. Vale, how is he? Do you have any updates?" Clarice stopped, turned toward the cameras. Her voice broke at exactly the right moment. "Please," she sobbed. "Please pray for him. He's all I have." The cameras loved it. People watching at home believed every word. She looked like a woman shattered by fear, a devoted wife on the edge of losing everything. But Ethan, lying unconscious in a hospital bed upstairs, would have recognized the performance. He'd seen it before. McKenna arrived later. No cameras followed the maid. She walked into the hospital quietly. No tears. No drama. No one noticed her. She made her way to Ethan's room without asking for directions, like she already knew where to go. Inside, machines hummed. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Ethan lay still, eyes closed, breathing shallow. McKenna stood at the foot of his bed. She didn't cry, didn't pray, didn't touch him. She just stared at the machines, not in fear, not in hope, like she was checking a clock. A nurse walked in, glanced at McKenna. "Family?" the nurse asked. "Staff," McKenna said calmly. The nurse nodded and left. McKenna stayed a few more minutes, watching, waiting. Then she walked out. No emotion, no hesitation, just done. That night, something happened. Ethan's heart stopped. The monitor flatlined. Alarms screamed. Doctors and nurses rushed in. Compression started. Medicine was injected. 12 seconds passed. 12 seconds of nothing. Then his heart kicked back. The monitor beeped again. Steady, strong. The doctor stepped back, relieved. "He's stable," one of them said. But something changed in those 12 seconds. Somewhere deep inside that still body, behind closed eyes and unmoving limbs, Ethan woke up. Not physically, but mentally. He could hear. He could think. He could feel. But he couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Couldn't open his eyes. He was trapped, locked inside himself, aware of everything, able to do nothing. Imagine lying there, awake, and no one knows. Some pain is invisible. Don't scroll past it. Ethan tried to scream. His mind raged against the silence, but his body didn't respond. He was a prisoner, and no one knew he was awake. Hours passed, days blurred, voices came and went. Doctors talked about his condition, nurses adjusted machines. Clarice visited and cried for the cameras, but Ethan heard it all, every word, every lie, every truth. And then McKenna came back. She entered the room alone, late at night when the hallways were quiet. She walked to his bedside, stood there for a long moment. Then she leaned close and whispered, "If you wake up, everything falls apart." Ethan's mind exploded with rage and fear, but his body stayed still. McKenna continued, her voice calm and deliberate. "But if you don't, the money disappears, the questions die, and the story ends clean." She paused, "And I'll make sure you never know what really happened." Then she left, just like that. Ethan lay there, his heart pounding inside his chest. The monitor beeped faster, but McKenna was already gone, and Ethan was alone, awake, aware, terrified, because now he understood. McKenna wasn't checking the machines out of concern. She was checking a clock, waiting for something, counting down to something. But what? What countdown had already started? And how much time did Ethan have left? Ethan woke into a prison, not one with bars or walls. Worse, his own body. He could hear the oxygen hissing through the tube, the steady beep of the heart monitor, the distant footsteps in the hallway. But he couldn't move. He tried lifting a finger. Nothing. Tried swallowing. Nothing. Tried opening his eyes. Nothing. Panic exploded inside him. His mind screamed. His chest felt tight. His lungs burned with the need to gasp, but his body stayed frozen. Locked. Silent. He wanted to thrash, to rip the tubes out, to sit up and demand answers, but nothing responded. For hours, the panic consumed him. Then something else took over. Survival. Ethan Vale didn't build an empire by panicking. He built it by reading rooms, reading people, staying 3 steps ahead, and right now, trapped in this bed, he needed to do the same thing. If he reacted now, if his heart rate spiked too much, if he gave any sign that he was awake, whoever was behind this would adjust. They'd change their plan, they'd cover their tracks, and Ethan would lose his only advantage. So he forced himself to stay still, to breathe evenly, to listen and learn. Clarice came during the day, every day, right on schedule. When nurses were in the room, she was perfect. She cried softly, touched Ethan's hand, kissed his forehead. "Please come back to me," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The nurses smiled sympathetically. "He's a fighter," one of them said. Clarice nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. He's so strong." But the moment the nurses left, everything changed. Clarice's hand stayed on Ethan's chest, but her voice dropped. Cold. Sharp. "Don't wake up and act confused," she said quietly. "You always ruin things when you ask questions." Ethan's heart pounded under her palm. The monitor beeped faster, Clarice noticed. She leaned closer, her breath against his ear. "I know you can't hear me," she whispered. "But just in case, stay quiet." Then she stood up, fixed her hair, and walked to the door. A nurse passed by in the hallway. Clarice's voice immediately brightened. "He's so strong," she said, smiling through tears. "I know he'll fight. He always does." The nurse nodded kindly. Clarice left, and Ethan lay there, heart racing, mind spinning. She knew, or she suspected. Either way, she was warning him, threatening him. Ethan forced his breathing to slow, forced his heart rate to settle. He had to stay calm, had to stay hidden. Because if Clarice realized he was awake, she'd finish what she started. Hours passed. The room stayed quiet. Then the door opened again. Soft footsteps. No voices. Ethan knew who it was before she even reached the bed. Makina. She walked to his side slowly, adjusted the blanket near his feet, smoothed the sheet across his chest. Her movements were careful, professional. But then she stopped and leaned close. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're still here, I can tell." Ethan's pulse jumped. The monitor beeped once, twice. Makina didn't pull back. She stayed right there, her face inches from his. "Your heart changes when people talk to you," she said softly. "It's small, but it's there." Ethan's mind raced. She knows. Makina straightened up, looked toward the door, then she walked over and locked it. The soft click echoed in the room. Ethan's chest tightened. What is she doing? Makina came back to the bed. She pulled a chair close and sat down. Not rushed, not panicked. Calm, like she had all the time in the world. "I don't have long," she said quietly. "So, I'll be quick." Ethan listened, every nerve in his body screaming. Makina folded her hands in her lap. "My name isn't Makina," she said. "That's just what I use when I'm inside houses like yours." Ethan's mind went blank. "What?" "I work with a federal unit," she continued. "Financial crime, corruption, People who hide behind charities and clean reputations. Ethan's thoughts exploded. Federal? Your wife has been laundering money through your foundation for years, McKenna said, her voice steady. Moving assets, erasing trails, preparing for a clean exit. No, that's not possible. But even as Ethan's mind rejected it, pieces started clicking into place. The questions Clarice asked, the late-night phone calls, the offshore account he didn't recognize. He's still in the way. Oh, God, McKenna leaned forward slightly. The accident wasn't meant to kill you, she said softly. It was meant to remove you. Ethan wanted to scream, wanted to move, wanted to do anything, but he stayed frozen. And now, McKenna continued, she thinks you can't stop her. Silence filled the room. The heart monitor beeped steadily. McKenna stood up, walked back to the door, unlocked it. She paused, her hand on the handle. Then she turned back to look at Ethan. I'll make sure you never know what really happened, she said quietly. The same words she'd whispered before. But this time they sounded different. Not like a threat, like a promise. To someone else. McKenna opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The door closed softly behind her. Ethan lay there, his mind spinning. If McKenna was federal, if she was investigating Clarice, then why did she say those words? Who was she really talking to? And what was she about to do that no one else could hear? The next night McKenna came back. Late, when the hospital was quiet. She entered the room without knocking, walked straight to Ethan's bedside, and leaned close. Close enough that Ethan could smell the faint scent of soap and clean linen. Her voice was calm, surgical. If you wake up, she whispered, everything falls apart. Ethan's mind exploded. What? His heart slammed against his ribs. The monitor beeped faster. McKenna didn't pull back, didn't react. She just kept talking. But if you don't, she continued slowly, the money disappears. The questions die, and the story ends clean. Ethan wanted to scream, wanted to grab her, shake her, demand answers, but his body stayed frozen, silent, useless. McKenna paused. Then she said the line that shattered him. And I'll make sure you never know what really happened. Ethan's chest tightened. Fear flooded every corner of his mind. What does that mean? Is she threatening me? Is she working with Clarice? McKenna wasn't shaking, wasn't emotional. She sounded like someone reading instructions. Cold, clear, final. She straightened up, smoothed the blanket across Ethan's chest like she was finishing a chore. Then she walked toward the door. Her footsteps were soft, controlled. She reached for the handle, but before she left, she stopped, turned her head slightly, and said one last thing. You trusted the wrong person. The door clicked shut. Silence. Ethan lay there, his mind racing. The heart monitor beeped wildly now. Too fast, too loud. A nurse would notice soon. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to calm down, but his thoughts wouldn't stop. You trusted the wrong person. Who? Who did he trust? Clarice? Obviously. But McKenna said it like it was someone else. Someone Ethan didn't suspect. Ethan replayed every moment of the past year, every conversation, every decision, every person who had access to his life. Clarice was the obvious answer. She asked the questions, made the calls, acted suspicious. But what if it wasn't just her? What if someone else was involved, someone Ethan never questioned? His lawyers, his board members, his assistant? Ethan trusted so many people. Too many. And now he didn't know which one had betrayed him. Or worse, what if McKenna was lying? What if she wasn't federal at all? What if she was the one pulling the strings? Ethan's thoughts spiraled. He didn't know who to believe, didn't know what was real anymore. All he knew was that he was trapped, awake but helpless, surrounded by people who either wanted him dead or wanted something from him, and he couldn't do a damn thing about it. The door opened again. Ethan's pulse spiked, footsteps, heavier this time, a man's voice. "How's he doing?" a nurse responded. "Stable, no changes." "Good," the man said. Ethan didn't recognize the voice. The footsteps came closer, stopped near the bed. "Poor guy," the man said quietly. "Lying here like this, doesn't even know what's happening." The nurse made a sympathetic sound. "His wife must be devastated," the man continued. "She is," the nurse said. "She's here every day." The man chuckled softly. "Yeah, I bet she is." Something in his tone made Ethan's skin crawl. The nurse didn't seem to notice. "I'll let you have a moment," she said. Her footsteps faded. The door closed. The man stayed. Ethan heard him shift, felt the bed dip slightly as the man leaned against it. "You really messed things up, didn't you?" the man said quietly. Ethan's heart hammered. "Who is this?" "All that control," the man continued. "All that power. And now look at you." Silence. Then the man laughed, low, bitter. "She told me you'd wake up eventually. I said you wouldn't. Guess we'll see who's right." Ethan's mind screamed. Who is she? Clarice? McKenna? Someone else? The man straightened up. "Either way," he said, "it doesn't matter. The plan's already in motion." He walked toward the door, paused. "Sleep tight, Ethan." The door opened, closed, and the man was gone. Ethan lay there, shaking inside. The plan's already in motion. What plan? Who was that man? And why did he sound so sure Ethan wouldn't wake up? The heart monitor beeped faster again. Ethan tried to calm himself, but fear gripped him tight. He was running out of time. Whatever was happening, whatever Clarice and this stranger were planning, it was already moving. And Ethan was stuck, trapped in his own body, unable to warn anyone, unable to fight back, unable to stop them. Trust is a gift. Betrayal is a wound. If this hit you, don't keep it silent. Ethan replayed McKenna's words one more time. You trusted the wrong person. Who? Who did he trust that he shouldn't have? And how many people were involved in this? The door opened again. Soft footsteps. McKenna. She walked to the bed, stood there for a long moment. Then she whispered, so quietly Ethan almost missed it, "I'm sorry." And she left. Ethan's mind fractured. Sorry? Sorry for what? For threatening him? For lying? For knowing the truth and not stopping it? Or for something worse? Who was McKenna really talking about when she said, wrong person? Ethan's brain did what brains always do when they're scared. It picked the simplest answer. McKenna was involved. She had to be. Think about it. She had access to everything, his house, his office, his schedule. She knew where he kept documents, where he made calls, when he was alone. She'd been there for 11 years of watching, learning, waiting. Maybe she'd been planted from the beginning. Maybe the agency that sent her was fake. Maybe she'd been working with someone all along, collecting information, building a case, waiting for the right moment to strike. It made sense. It was clean. Logical. McKenna was the maid, the invisible woman, the one no one suspected. Perfect cover. But then Ethan started replaying his memories, and the more he thought about it, the less it fit. McKenna never asked for money, not once in 11 years. She never hinted at needing more, never complained about her salary, never acted like she wanted something from him. She just worked. And when Ethan tried to tip her during holidays, she always declined politely. "I'm paid well, sir. Thank you." That didn't sound like someone planning to steal millions. McKenna never asked about his business, never questioned where he was going, never showed interest in his meetings or deals. She cleaned, she cooked when asked, she left. That was it. No leverage, No manipulation, no games. But Clarice asked about everything. What happens if you're not here to sign? Who has access to the foundation? Why is everything tied to your approval? Clarice made late-night phone calls. Clarice said, "He's still in the way." Clarice changed in the months before the accident. Ethan's chest tightened. He'd been so focused on McKenna's words that he almost missed the obvious. Clarice was the one who wanted him gone, not McKenna. One afternoon, the pieces fell into place. A nurse stepped out of the room to grab something. Clarice was sitting beside Ethan's bed, scrolling through her phone. The moment the door closed, her expression changed. She set the phone down, leaned over Ethan. Her voice dropped, sharp, cold. "If you wake up like this," she said quietly, "you'll ruin everything." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. Clarice pressed her fingers against his chest, not gently. She was checking, feeling for his heartbeat, watching for any sign of movement. "You always ruin things when you ask questions," she whispered. "So don't wake up asking." Her fingers stayed on his chest a moment longer. Then the door handle turned. Clarice's face transformed instantly. Soft, loving, worried. She smiled sweetly as the nurse walked back in. "He's doing so well," Clarice said, her voice warm. "I can feel his strength." The nurse smiled. "He's a fighter." Clarice nodded, wiping a fake tear from her eye. Ethan wanted to scream, wanted to grab the nurse, shake her, tell her the truth. But he couldn't. He just lay there, trapped, while Clarice played the perfect wife. After the nurse left again, Clarice stood up, adjusted her designer handbag, checked her reflection in the window. Then she walked out without looking back. And Ethan understood. McKenna's whisper wasn't a confession. It was a warning. If you wake up, everything falls apart. She wasn't talking to Ethan. She was talking about him. Warning someone else. Maybe Clarice. Maybe the man who visited earlier. Maybe both. McKenna wasn't threatening Ethan. She was trying to protect him. Or at least she was playing a role, pretending to be on their side so she could gather evidence. That's what federal agents do. They go undercover. They play along. They wait for the right moment. Ethan's mind spun. If McKenna was federal and if she'd been investigating Clarice for years, then everything she said made sense. She had to keep her cover, had to make Clarice believe she was loyal, had to whisper the right words so no one suspected her. But then why did she say, "I'm sorry"? Why did she look at Ethan like she was carrying a burden? And why did she lock the door when she told him the truth? Ethan's thoughts tangled. He wanted to trust McKenna, wanted to believe she was the good one, but trust had nearly killed him, and he didn't know if he could afford to trust anyone anymore. The door opened again. Footsteps. Ethan's pulse jumped. It was McKenna. She walked to his bed slowly, adjusted the blanket near his feet. Then she leaned close. Her voice was barely audible. "She knows you're waking up," McKenna whispered. "She's going to move soon." Ethan's heart stopped. "I can't protect you if you give yourself away," McKenna continued. "Stay still. Stay quiet. Trust me. Trust me." Ethan wanted to. God, he wanted to. But how could he? McKenna straightened up, looked toward the door, then back at Ethan. "I know you don't believe me," she said softly. "But I'm the only one on your side." She walked to the door, paused. "And if you want to survive this, you'll figure that out soon." She left. The door clicked shut. Ethan lay there, his mind racing. What if McKenna wasn't the villain? What if she was the only one who knew the truth? What if she'd been trying to warn him all along, and he'd been too blind to see it? But then who was the man who visited? And what was the plan already in motion? And how much time did Ethan have before Clarice made her final move? The heart monitor beeped, steadily. Ethan forced himself to stay calm, to think clearly. He needed answers. and the only person who seemed willing to give them was McKenna. But could he trust her? Or was she just another player in a game Ethan didn't fully understand? The door opened one more time. Clarice walked in. She didn't look at Ethan, just stood near the window, staring out at the city lights. Her phone buzzed. She answered immediately. "Yes," she said quietly. "He's still out." Pause. "No. There's no sign of him waking up." Another pause. Then her voice dropped even lower. "Good. Then we move tomorrow." Ethan's blood ran cold. Tomorrow. What was McKenna really trying to tell him, and was she the only one who could stop what was coming? 2 nights later, McKenna came back, but this time was different. She didn't sneak in, didn't whisper like she was hiding. She walked straight to Ethan's bed and sat down in the chair beside him. Her voice was calm, clear. "I know you can hear me." Ethan's pulse exploded. The heart monitor beeped faster, louder, too loud. McKenna glanced at the machine, nodded slowly. "That's what I thought," she said. Ethan's chest tightened. "She knows." McKenna leaned back in the chair, folding her hands in her lap. "Your heart changes when she touches you," McKenna said quietly. "It doesn't change when doctors talk. It doesn't change when nurses move you. But when Clarice walks in, your heart rate spikes every time." Ethan felt exposed, naked, like every secret he'd been holding was written on his face. McKenna watched him for a moment. Then she spoke again. "My name isn't McKenna." Silence dropped like a stone. Ethan's mind went blank. "What?" "That's the name I use when I'm inside houses like this," she continued. "When I'm undercover." Ethan's thoughts raced. Undercover? "I work with a federal unit," McKenna said. "Financial crime, corruption, white-collar criminals who hide behind charities and clean reputations." Ethan's world tilted. "Federal. She's federal." "I've been in your house for 11 years, McKenna said. "Not because I like cleaning, but because your wife has been laundering money through your foundation for almost that long." No, that's not possible. But even as Ethan's mind rejected it, the pieces started falling into place. The offshore account, the questions Clarice asked, the late-night phone calls. He's still in the way. Oh, God. McKenna leaned forward slightly. "She's been moving assets for years," McKenna said, "erasing trails, funneling money through fake charities, using your name, your reputation, your foundation." Ethan wanted to scream, wanted to sit up and demand proof, but he couldn't. He just lay there, helpless, as McKenna laid out the truth. "Your wife isn't just stealing from you," McKenna continued. "She's been building an exit strategy. A clean one, where she walks away with millions and you're left holding the blame." Ethan's chest burned. Clarice, his wife, the woman he married, the woman he trusted, had been planning this for years. McKenna's voice softened. "The accident wasn't meant to kill you," she said quietly. Ethan's heart stopped. "It was meant to remove you." The words hit like a hammer. Remove him. Not kill. Remove. "If you died outright, there'd be investigations," McKenna explained. "Questions, audits, people would dig into your finances, and Clarice couldn't risk that." Ethan's mind spun. "But if you were incapacitated?" McKenna continued. "If you were alive but unable to speak, unable to sign documents, unable to stop her?" She paused. "Then she could move everything. Quietly. Legally. With your power of attorney." Ethan's blood ran cold. That's why Clarice asked about proxies, about signatures, about who had access. She wasn't worried about protecting him. She was planning to replace him. McKenna leaned closer. "And now she thinks you can't stop her," she said softly. Ethan tried to move, tried to lift a hand, a finger, anything. Nothing. His body stayed frozen. McKenna watched him. "I know you're trying," she said gently. "But you can't move yet. The doctors say it might take days, maybe weeks. Ethan's heart sank. Weeks? He didn't have weeks. Clarice said she was moving tomorrow. Tomorrow. McKenna must have seen the panic in his heart rate because she spoke again. I won't let her finish this, McKenna said firmly. That's why I'm here. That's why I've been here for 11 years. Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted to trust her. But how could he? Everyone he'd trusted had lied to him. McKenna seemed to read his thoughts. I know you don't trust me, she said quietly. I wouldn't either, but I need you to understand something. She leaned even closer. I'm not here to save you, McKenna said. I'm here to stop her. And the only way I can do that is if you stay alive long enough to wake up and tell the truth. Ethan's chest tightened. So don't give yourself away, McKenna continued. Don't let her know you're awake. Because the moment she realizes you can hear her, she'll move faster. And I won't be able to stop her. She stood up, walked to the door, paused. I'm going to lock this door when I leave, McKenna said. No one else comes in tonight. Not Clarice. Not anyone. She looked back at Ethan. Tomorrow things are going to move fast, she said, and I need you ready. She unlocked the door, stepped into the hallway. Then she turned back one last time. Your wife isn't the only one involved, McKenna said quietly. There's someone else, someone close to you, someone you never suspected. Ethan's heart stopped. What? And if we don't move carefully, McKenna continued, they'll both walk away free. She closed the door, and Ethan lay there in the dark, his mind racing. Sometimes the people closest to us are strangers. If you felt that, others need to hear this. Clarice wasn't working alone. Someone else was involved, someone Ethan trusted, someone he never suspected. But who? His lawyer? His assistant? A board member? A friend? Ethan replayed every conversation, every meeting, every interaction. Who had access to his foundation? Who knew enough to help Clarice pull this off? And why would they betray him? The heart monitor beeped steadily. Ethan forced himself to breathe, to think. Tomorrow, McKenna said things would move fast. Tomorrow, Clarice was making her move, and Ethan was running out of time. But there was one question that burned hotter than all the others. If McKenna was federal, and if she'd been investigating Clarice for years, why hadn't she stopped her already? What was she waiting for? And what did she need Ethan to do that she couldn't do herself? The hospital changed overnight. Small things, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But Ethan was paying attention. A different security guard stood at the end of the hallway, younger, sharper, eyes that scanned every person who walked past. New codes were entered at the nurse's station. Passwords that weren't there before. Doctors and nurses spoke in lower voices when they passed Ethan's room. Something was happening. And Clarice noticed immediately. She started coming more often. 3 times a day now, instead of 2. Her grief was slipping, turning into something else. Impatience. One morning, Ethan heard her in the hallway talking to a doctor. How long is this going to take? Clarice asked, her tone sharp. The doctor hesitated. Mrs. Vale, recovery from this kind of trauma is unpredictable. It could be days, it could be weeks. Weeks? Clarice repeated, her voice rising slightly. I can't wait weeks. The doctor tried to be gentle. I understand this is difficult, but no, Clarice interrupted. You don't understand. I have decisions to make, things to handle. I need to know when he's waking up. Silence. We're doing everything we can, the doctor said carefully. Clarice's heels clicked away. Ethan lay there, his heart pounding. She's running out of time. That afternoon, a lawyer arrived. Ethan heard him introduce himself to the nurses, heard Clarice's voice brighten when she greeted him. They stepped into Ethan's room together. The lawyer stood near the foot of the bed, flipping through papers. So, Clarice said quietly, what can I sign? The lawyer cleared his throat. Well, Mrs. Vale, technically you can't sign anything on his behalf unless you have power of attorney. I don't? Clarice asked, her voice tight. Not yet, the lawyer said. But if his condition continues, we can petition the court for medical and financial guardianship. How long does that take? A few days, maybe a week. Clarice exhaled sharply. That's too long. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. It's the legal process. There's no way to speed it up without— Find a way, Clarice said coldly. The lawyer didn't respond. Clarice smiled, softened her tone. Please, she said sweetly. I just want to protect what's ours. You understand? The lawyer nodded. I'll see what I can do. They left, and Ethan's chest tightened. She's moving faster. That evening, Ethan heard Clarice on her phone outside his room. Her voice was low, frustrated. I'm tired of waiting, she hissed. He's still breathing. That's the problem. Ethan's pulse spiked. No, Clarice continued. I can't move anything while he's like this. The lawyers are blocking me. Pause. Then we need to fix it, Clarice snapped. Tonight. Ethan's blood ran cold. Tonight. The door to his room opened a few hours later. Late, past midnight. Clarice walked in, but she wasn't alone. A man followed her. Ethan had never seen him before. Tall, well-dressed, his voice was smooth, careful. This him? The man asked quietly. Yes, Clarice said. The man walked closer to the bed, looked down at Ethan, studied him like he was examining a problem. He looks stable, the man said. He is, Clarice replied. That's the issue. The man turned to her. You're sure he's not waking up? The doctors say it could. Take weeks, Clarice said. But I don't have weeks. The man nodded slowly. Then we make it clean. No noise, no attention. Clarice crossed her arms. How? The man glanced at the machines, the IV drip, the oxygen tube. There are ways, he said quietly. Ethan's heart hammered. They're going to kill me. Right here. Right now. He won't wake up, Clarice said, more to herself than to the man. He can't. The man reached for the IV line. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. The man froze. The door opened. McKenna stepped inside. Her expression was calm, professional. This area is restricted, she said evenly. Clarice turned, her smile already in place. Oh, I'm sorry, Clarice said sweetly. We were just visiting. McKenna's eyes flicked to the man, then back to Clarice. Visiting hours ended 2 hours ago, McKenna said. Clarice's smile stayed, but her eyes flickered, just once. Fear. The man studied McKenna carefully. Too carefully. Like he was trying to figure out who she was. What? She knew. Who are you? He asked quietly. McKenna didn't answer. She just stared back. The silence stretched, tense, heavy. The man's jaw tightened. He glanced at Clarice. We should go, he said. Clarice hesitated. But now, the man said firmly. Clarice nodded. They walked toward the door, but as they passed McKenna, the man paused, looked at her one more time. Have we met? He asked. McKenna's expression didn't change. No, she said simply. The man stared at her for another beat. Then he walked out. Clarice followed, glancing back at McKenna with something close to suspicion. The door closed. McKenna stayed still for a moment. Then she walked to Ethan's bedside, checked the IV line, the monitors, everything. They were going to do it tonight, she said quietly. If I hadn't come in. Ethan's heart pounded. McKenna looked down at him. You're running out of time, she said. And so am I. She turned to leave. But before she reached the door, Ethan's monitor beeped wildly. His pulse racing, his body screaming. McKenna stopped, looked back. I know, she said softly. I'm scared too." She left, and Ethan lay there in the dark, his mind racing. The man who came with Clarice, the way he looked at McKenna, the way he asked, "Who are you?" Like he recognized her, or like he should have, and the way McKenna stared back, calm, unbothered, but something in her eyes said she knew exactly who he was. Why did the stranger look more afraid of McKenna than getting caught? McKenna understood one thing perfectly. Timing was everything. If Ethan woke up too soon, Clarice would deny everything, play the victim, paint him as confused and traumatized. If he stayed silent too long, Clarice would finish what she started, and Ethan would never wake up at all. So McKenna built a moment Clarice couldn't escape. The next morning, Ethan's room filled with people, a doctor, a lawyer, a hospital security supervisor, and a witness from the hospital administration. They stood around his bed like a trial was about to begin. Ethan heard them talking quietly, checking papers, waiting. For what, he didn't know. Then the door opened. Clarice walked in, confident, perfectly dressed, hair styled, makeup flawless. She looked like a woman in control, but the moment she saw the people in the room, her steps slowed. Her eyes scanned the faces. The lawyer, the doctor, security. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes narrowed. "What is this?" she asked, her tone light but careful. McKenna stepped forward from the corner of the room. "A check-in," she said calmly. Clarice's gaze shifted to McKenna. Something flickered in her expression. Suspicion. Maybe fear. "A check-in for what?" Clarice asked. The doctor stepped closer to Ethan's bed. "Mrs. Vale," the doctor said gently, "we'd like to conduct a responsiveness test, with witnesses present." Clarice's smile tightened. "Why do you need witnesses?" "Standard procedure," the lawyer said smoothly. Given the circumstances, Clarice looked around the room again. She didn't like this. Ethan could feel it. The doctor leaned over Ethan, spoke clearly, slowly. "Mr. Vale, if you can hear me, I need you to open your eyes." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. This was it. The moment he'd been waiting for. The moment he'd been terrified of. He focused every ounce of energy he had left, focused on his eyelids, on the muscles that hadn't moved in days. Move. Please. Move. He felt resistance, like pushing against a wall, but he pushed harder, and slowly, painfully, his eyelids began to lift. Light flooded in. Blurry at first, too bright. He blinked. Once. Twice. The room came into focus, faces staring down at him. The doctor, the lawyer, security, and Clarice. Her face drained of all color. She stepped back, like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh my God," the doctor whispered. "He's awake." Clarice's hand went to her mouth, but her eyes weren't filled with relief. They were filled with panic. Ethan's throat burned. He tried to speak. His lips moved. No sound came out at first, just a rasp. He tried again. "Claire," he croaked. Everyone leaned in. "Clarice," Ethan whispered, his voice broken and raw. Tears filled Clarice's eyes. "Ethan," she breathed. Thank God you're awake." She moved toward him, but McKenna stepped between them. "Mrs. Vale," McKenna said calmly. "Please, step back." Clarice's eyes snapped to McKenna. "Excuse me?" McKenna didn't move. "Let him speak." Clarice looked at the others in the room. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I'm his wife. I have every right." "Let him speak," McKenna repeated, her tone firmer now. Clarice's jaw tightened, but she stayed where she was. McKenna turned to Ethan. "Mr. Vale," she said clearly, "do you remember what happened?" Ethan's mind raced. He looked at Clarice. Her eyes were locked on his, warning him, begging him, threatening him, all at once. Ethan swallowed hard. "The accident," he rasped. "Yes." The doctor said gently. You were in a car accident. Do you remember anything else? Ethan's gaze shifted to McKenna. She nodded slightly. Go ahead. Ethan took a shaky breath. I heard things, he whispered. Clarice's face went pale. What did you hear? The lawyer asked. Ethan's eyes stayed on Clarice. I heard people talking. Who? McKenna asked. Ethan's voice was barely audible. My wife. Silence filled the room. Clarice laughed. It was sharp. Too bright. Ethan, honey, she said quickly. You've been unconscious for days. You're confused. It's normal after trauma like this. The doctor glanced at her, then back at Ethan. Mr. Vale, the doctor said carefully. What did you hear your wife say? Ethan's throat tightened. He looked at Clarice. She was smiling now, that same perfect smile she used for cameras, but her eyes were screaming. Don't you dare. Ethan spoke anyway. She said, I was in the way. The room went completely still. Clarice's smile faltered, just for a second. Then it came back, stronger. That's absurd, she said, her voice shaking with what sounded like hurt. I would never. She said she was tired of waiting. Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger. She said I was still breathing. And that was the problem. Clarice's face twisted. That's a lie, she snapped. McKenna stepped forward. Then explain why you tried to erase him, McKenna said calmly. All eyes turned to Clarice. She looked around the room, at the lawyer, the doctor, security, then back at McKenna, and she smiled, wide, confident. Erase him? Clarice repeated softly. You have no idea what you're talking about. Her voice was steady now, too steady. She turned to the lawyer. This is slander, she said firmly. My husband is confused, traumatized, and this woman, she pointed at McKenna, is putting words in his mouth. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Clarice looked at the doctor. You said yourself that trauma affects memory, she continued. That patients can be confused, disoriented. The doctor nodded slowly. That's true, but then that's what's happening here, Clarice interrupted. My husband needs rest, not an interrogation. She turned to Ethan. Her eyes softened. Baby, she said gently, I know you're scared. I know you're confused, but I'm here. I've been here every single day. I love you. Ethan stared at her, and for a moment he almost believed her. Almost. But then McKenna spoke. Mr. Vale, McKenna said quietly. Do you trust your wife? Ethan's heart pounded. He looked at Clarice, at the woman he married, the woman he built a life with, and he saw nothing but lies. No, Ethan whispered. Clarice's face went cold. When the truth is denied, only witnesses matter. Be the witness. Share this. Clarice straightened her shoulders. Then prove it, she said, her voice like ice. She looked at McKenna. If I'm so guilty, Clarice continued, then show them proof. Real proof, not the confused ramblings of a Yisai, traumatized man. McKenna didn't flinch. Gladly, she said, and she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small recording device, placed it on the table beside Ethan's bed. Clarice's eyes widened, just slightly. What is that? She asked. McKenna smiled. The truth. If Clarice is bold enough to deny everything, what proof does McKenna have that can't be talked away? Clarice's smile didn't crack, didn't tremble, didn't fade. It held firm, like armor. Erase him? She repeated softly, tilting her head slightly. You have no idea what you're talking about. The room went completely still. The doctor glanced at McKenna, then back at Clarice. The lawyer shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Security stiffened, hands moving closer to their sides. But Clarice looked perfectly calm. She walked closer to Ethan's bed, slowly, gracefully, like she was approaching something fragile. She placed her hand gently on Ethan's arm. Her touch was soft, warm, tender. She was performing, and she was good at it. "My husband is confused," Clarice said, her voice breaking just slightly. "Trauma does strange things to the mind. The doctors told me this might happen." She looked at the doctor. "Didn't you?" she asked. The doctor cleared his throat. "Well, yes. Post-traumatic confusion is common after—" "Exactly," Clarice interrupted gently. "He's been through so much. Of course he's disoriented." She turned back to Ethan. Her eyes were soft, loving. But Ethan saw the warning in them, the threat. "Don't you dare keep talking." Ethan wanted to scream, wanted to rip her hand off his arm, wanted to tell everyone in the room what she really was. But his voice was still weak, his body still fragile. McKenna didn't argue. She just stood there, calm and unbothered. Then she said simply, "Step away from him." Clarice turned slowly, her smile still in place. "Excuse me?" she said, her tone polite but sharp. "Step away from him," McKenna repeated. "Now." Clarice's eyes narrowed. She let out a soft laugh. Light, amused. "You're a maid," Clarice said slowly. "Remember your place." The words hung in the air, cold, dismissive. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. The doctor shifted. But McKenna? McKenna didn't flinch. She nodded once, then reached into her pocket, pulled out a small device, placed it carefully on the table beside Ethan's bed. A recorder. Clarice's eyes locked onto it. Her smile faded. Just slightly. "What is that?" Clarice asked, her voice tighter now. McKenna looked at her calmly. "Proof," she said. Clarice's hand slipped off Ethan's arm. She straightened up. Her expression was still controlled, but something shifted in her eyes. Fear. "That's illegal," Clarice said quickly. "You can't record people without their consent." The lawyer spoke up. "Actually, Mrs. Vale, in certain investigative circumstances—" "I don't care," Clarice snapped, her composure cracking just a bit. "This is a violation. She has no right." "Play it," McKenna said, cutting her off. Clarice's mouth closed. She stared at McKenna, then at the recorder, then at the door. Her eyes flicked toward the exit, just for a second. But Ethan saw it. She was calculating, deciding, stay and fight or run. The security guard near the door noticed too. He stepped slightly to the side, blocking the exit. Clarice swallowed. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising. "I'm not going to stand here and be accused." "Then leave," McKenna said simply. Clarice froze. "But if you leave now," McKenna continued, "everyone in this room will know exactly why." Silence. Clarice's jaw tightened. She looked at the lawyer. "You can't let her do this." The lawyer hesitated. "Mrs. Vale, if there's evidence—" "There's no evidence," Clarice insisted. "Just lies, manipulation." McKenna pressed a button on the recorder. The room filled with sound. Static at first, then a voice. Clarice's voice. Low, sharp, clear. "I'm tired of waiting. He's still breathing. That's the problem." The lawyer's face went pale. The doctor's hand froze mid-motion. Security stiffened. Clarice didn't move. She just stood there, staring at the recorder, her face completely blank. The recording continued. Another voice. Male. Smooth. "Then we need to fix it. Tonight." Clarice's voice again. "How?" The man. "Make it clean. No noise. No attention." Silence filled the room. Then the recording stopped. No one spoke. No one moved. All eyes turned to Clarice. She stood perfectly still, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not the warm, loving smile she'd been wearing. This one was different, colder, sharper. "That could be anyone," Clarice said calmly. The lawyer blinked. "Mrs. Vale, that could be edited," Clarice continued, taken out of context, fabricated. She looked at McKenna. You have no proof that's even my voice, Clarice said. McKenna tilted her head slightly. You want to take that risk? She asked quietly. Clarice's smile tightened. I don't have to risk anything, she said. You're bluffing. McKenna reached for the recorder, pressed another button, more static, then another voice. This time Clarice was speaking to someone different. If he wakes up like this, he'll ruin everything. I need this resolved. A pause, then the male voice again. We'll handle it. Just keep him quiet. Clarice's breath hitched, just once, but Ethan heard it. The doctor looked at Clarice, his expression changing. The lawyer took a step back. Security moved closer. Clarice's eyes darted around the room. She was cornered, and she knew it. This is a setup, Clarice said, her voice shaking now. She's setting me up. Who is we? McKenna asked calmly. Clarice didn't answer. Who are you talking to? McKenna pressed. Clarice's hands clenched into fists. I want my lawyer, she said tightly. You have one, McKenna said, nodding toward the lawyer in the room. Clarice's eyes flashed. A different one. McKenna nodded slowly. That's fine, she said. But you're not leaving this room until security escorts you. Clarice's face went pale. You can't hold me here. Actually, the lawyer said quietly, given the evidence, hospital security has the right to detain you until law enforcement arrives. Clarice's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with something close to hatred. You did this, she whispered. Ethan stared back at her. No, he rasped. You did. Clarice's face twisted. She turned to McKenna. Who are you really? Clarice demanded. McKenna didn't answer. She just stared back, calm, unbothered, in control. Clarice's hands trembled. This isn't over, she said quietly. McKenna smiled. Yes, she said. It is. Security moved forward. Mrs. Vale, the guard said, we're going to need you to come with us. Clarice looked around the room one last time, at the doctor, the lawyer, Ethan, then at McKenna. Her eyes burned. You have no idea what you've started, Clarice said, and she walked toward the door. But before she left, she stopped, turned back, looked straight at Ethan. He's not the only one who wanted you gone, she said quietly. Then she was gone. The door closed behind her. The room stayed silent. Ethan's heart pounded. He's not the only one. What did that mean? Who else wanted him gone? And why did Clarice suddenly want to leave? What was on that recording that she didn't want anyone else to hear? McKenna pressed the button again. The room went silent. Then Clarice's voice filled the space. Low, sharp, certain. He's still breathing. That's the problem. Silence swallowed everything. The lawyer's face tightened. The doctor's hand froze mid-motion. Security shifted, eyes locked on Clarice. No one moved. The recording continued. Another clip. Same voice. If he wakes up like this, he'll ruin everything. I need this resolved. Clarice stepped back, her head shaking slowly. That could be anyone, she said, her voice trembling. That could be edited. McKenna didn't blink. There's more, she said calmly. She pressed play again. This time, a different voice came through. Male. Smooth. Unfamiliar. Make it clean. Clarice inhaled sharply. Her hand went to her chest. That's not, she started. But McKenna stopped the recording. The room fell silent again. That's enough for now, McKenna said quietly. Clarice's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, looking for support. Finding neither. She turned to the lawyer. You can't take this seriously, Clarice said, her voice rising. This could be fabricated, taken out of context. I need time to... The lawyer didn't answer. He wasn't looking at Clarice. He was staring at Ethan. Ethan's face was wet. Tears slipped down his cheeks. Silent. Steady. He wasn't crying from pain. He was crying from betrayal. From finally seeing the truth. From hearing his wife, the woman he loved, the woman he built a life with, casually discuss erasing him, like he was a problem to solve, not a person. Clarice followed the lawyer's gaze. She saw Ethan's tears, and for the first time her face changed. The confidence cracked. The control slipped. She looked afraid. "Ethan," she whispered, taking a step toward him. "Baby, please, let me explain." Ethan turned his head away. He couldn't look at her, couldn't stand the sight of her. Clarice's voice broke. "You don't understand," she said desperately. "It's not what it sounds like. I was just—" "Stop," McKenna said firmly. Clarice's mouth snapped shut. She looked at McKenna with pure hatred. "Who the hell are you?" Clarice demanded. McKenna met her gaze. "Someone who's been watching you for a very long time," she said. Clarice's face went pale. The doctor cleared his throat. "I think we need to call the authorities," he said quietly. Clarice spun toward him. "No," she said quickly. "You can't. This is all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" the lawyer repeated, his voice cold. "Mrs. Vale, we just heard you discuss your husband's death." "I never said death," Clarice shot back. "I never said that word." "You said he was the problem," the lawyer said. "You said you needed it resolved." Clarice's hands clenched into fists. "Words can mean anything," she said. "You're twisting them." The lawyer shook his head. "I don't think I am." Clarice looked around the room again, desperate now. "This is insane," she said. "You're all acting like I'm some kind of criminal." McKenna spoke calmly. "You laundered money through your husband's foundation. You orchestrated an accident to incapacitate him, and you planned to finish the job when he didn't die." Clarice's breathing quickened. "Prove it," she snapped. McKenna nodded. "I will." She turned to the security guard. "Call the police," McKenna said. "Tell them we have a confession on record and a witness who's ready to speak." The guard pulled out his radio. Clarice lunged forward. "Wait!" she shouted. "You can't do this!" Security stepped in front of her, blocked her path. Clarice stopped, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. She looked at Ethan. "You're really going to let them do this to me?" she asked, her voice cracking. After everything we've been through?" Ethan stared at her. His voice was hoarse, broken, but clear. "You tried to kill me." Clarice flinched. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, I didn't. I just needed—" "You needed me gone," Ethan finished. Clarice's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer, because it was true. Truth doesn't need permission to be heard. If this shook you, let it shake others too. The door opened. 2 police officers stepped inside. They looked at the group, then at Clarice. "Ma'am," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." Clarice's face went blank. "I'm not going anywhere," she said coldly. The officer stepped closer. "You can come willingly, or we can make this difficult," he said. Clarice looked at McKenna. "You did this," she whispered. McKenna didn't respond. Clarice turned to Ethan. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked out. The officers followed. The door closed behind them. The room stayed silent. Ethan lay there, exhausted, broken, but alive. The lawyer cleared his throat. "I'll need to review those recordings," he said to McKenna. McKenna nodded. "You'll have everything you need." The doctor stepped closer to Ethan. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the ceiling. The doctor nodded. "I'll give you some time." He left. The lawyer followed. Security lingered near the door, then left too. Only McKenna remained. She walked to Ethan's bedside, stood there quietly. "Why didn't you use it sooner?" Ethan rasped. McKenna looked at him. "Use what?" "The recording," Ethan said. "If you had that all along, why didn't you stop her earlier?" McKenna was silent for a moment. Then she spoke. "Because I needed more than her voice," she said quietly. "I needed proof of who she was working with." Ethan's chest tightened. "The man," he whispered. McKenna nodded. "The man?" Ethan's mind raced. "Who is he?" McKenna hesitated. "Someone you trust," she said. Ethan's heart sank. "Who?" McKenna looked toward the door, then back at Ethan. "I'll tell you," she said. "But not here. Not now." "Why not?" Ethan demanded. McKenna's expression was serious. "Because he's closer than you think," she said. "And if he finds out we know, he'll disappear." Ethan's pulse quickened. "How close?" McKenna didn't answer. She just looked at him, and Ethan understood. Close enough to be in this hospital, close enough to be watching, close enough to finish what Clarice started. If that recording was real, why hadn't McKenna used it sooner? And who was the man she was protecting Ethan from? Before the officers could escort her out, Clarice stopped, straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. The fear vanished from her face. "Even if that's my voice," Clarice said calmly, "where's the crime? Wanting control isn't illegal." The officers paused. Clarice's voice grew stronger. "I was frustrated. My husband was in a coma. I had no access. I was venting to a friend. That's not a crime." She looked at McKenna. "Is it?" McKenna nodded. "You're right." Clarice relaxed slightly. Then McKenna added, "Attempted murder is." The room tightened. Clarice's smile froze. McKenna turned to the doctor. "Please explain the unauthorized medication request from 3 nights ago." The doctor swallowed hard. "Someone attempted to alter Mr. Vale's dosage remotely." Clarice laughed once. Too loud. "This is ridiculous. Anyone could have hacked the system." McKenna turned to the lawyer. "And the emergency proxy papers she tried to rush through yesterday?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Those were irregular. They attempted to grant Mrs. Vale full authority over her husband, retroactive to the accident date." Clarice's face hardened. "I was protecting our assets." "By erasing your husband's ability to decide?" McKenna asked. Clarice's eyes flashed. "You have no authority here," she hissed. "You clean floors." McKenna met her gaze calmly. "And you erase people." Clarice stepped closer, voice dropping. "You think you're smarter than me?" McKenna didn't move. "No," she said softly. "I think I was earlier." Clarice froze. "What?" McKenna didn't answer. "How long have you been watching me?" Clarice demanded, her voice shaking. McKenna reached into her pocket, pulled out a folder. "Bank statements," she said, showing irregular transfers from the Vale Foundation to offshore accounts, dating back 3 years. Clarice's hands trembled. Those could be legitimate. McKenna flipped the folder open. "Emails between you and a financial consultant, discussing how to move assets without audits." Clarice stepped back. "That's private." "And phone records," McKenna interrupted. "Between you and the man who visited 3 nights ago." The same voice on the recording. Clarice's mouth opened, closed. The officer stepped forward. "Mrs. Vale, we need you to come with us. Now." Clarice looked at Ethan desperately. "Ethan, please. Tell them this is a mistake." Ethan's voice was hoarse but clear. "You tried to kill me." Clarice flinched. "I was trying to save us. From you." The officer pulled out handcuffs. Clarice's face crumpled. "This isn't fair. I gave up everything for him." The officer cuffed her wrists, read her rights. Before leaving, Clarice turned back. "He's not the only one who wanted you gone," she said coldly. Then she was gone. Ethan looked at McKenna. What did she mean? Exactly what she said, McKenna replied. Who else? McKenna walked to the window. Someone who's been planning this longer than Clarice. Ethan's blood ran cold. How long? Years. And you knew? McKenna nodded. I suspected. But I needed proof. Real proof. Proof of what? That this wasn't just about money. It was about power. Who? Ethan demanded. McKenna walked to the door, paused. Someone you trusted more than Clarice. She left. Ethan lay there, mind spinning. Who did he trust more than his wife? And what did McKenna mean by earlier? How long had this plan really been running? After the police took Clarice away, McKenna came back. She stood at the foot of Ethan's bed, silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. For 11 years, McKenna said quietly, I lived in your house and let everyone underestimate me. Ethan watched her, his heart aching. I wasn't sent to watch you, she continued. I chose to stay because I saw the truth. Ethan's throat tightened. What truth? He whispered. McKenna looked at him. That your wife was planning to destroy you, and I couldn't let that happen. Ethan's chest burned. Why? He asked. Why did you care? McKenna was quiet for a moment. Because I've seen what people like Clarice do, she said. They take, they manipulate, they erase good people and walk away rich. She paused. I couldn't watch it happen again. Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. You gave up 11 years of your life, he said. For me? McKenna shook her head. Not for you, she said gently. For justice. The door opened. Clarice was being brought back. Not by the local officers. By federal agents. 2 of them. Badges visible. Clarice's face was pale, her wrists still cuffed. She looked at McKenna, then at Ethan. This isn't over, she said coldly. McKenna turned to face her. You thought you were the smartest person in every room, McKenna said calmly. That's why you never saw me. Clarice scoffed. You're bluffing, she said. You have nothing. McKenna smiled gently. Then explain why the federal task force is waiting downstairs. The words hit like a bomb. Clarice's face drained of color. You're lying, she whispered. McKenna shook her head. They're here because I stopped being patient. Clarice's eyes widened. You've been working with them this whole time? McKenna didn't answer. Clarice turned toward the door, took a step. But security moved in front of her, blocking the exit. Ethan felt a surge of relief and fear, because Clarice wasn't panicking. She was thinking, calculating. McKenna stepped closer to Clarice, leaned in. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. You said if he wakes up, everything falls apart, McKenna whispered. Pause. You were right. Clarice stared at her, eyes burning with hatred. You think you've won? Clarice hissed. I think he survived, McKenna replied. Clarice's jaw clenched. You have no idea what you've started, she said quietly. One of the federal agents stepped forward. Mrs. Vale, he said, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and attempted murder. Clarice didn't look at him. She kept her eyes locked on McKenna. They'll never convict me, Clarice said. I have the best lawyers money can buy. McKenna nodded. You do, she said, but we have 11 years of evidence. Clarice's face twisted. You recorded everything, she whispered. Not everything, McKenna said, just enough. The agent moved to escort Clarice out, but before they could, Clarice spoke again. Louder this time. He's not innocent either, she said, pointing at Ethan. Everyone stopped. Ethan's heart skipped. What? He rasped. Clarice smiled, cold, sharp. You think you're the victim? She asked. You built an empire on lies. You destroyed competitors. You buried people who got in your way. Ethan's chest tightened. That's business, he said weakly. Is it? Clarice asked. Or is it the same thing I did, just with a different name? Silence filled the room. The agents looked uncomfortable. McKenna's expression didn't change. Clarice laughed bitterly. You're no saint, Ethan, she said, and they know it. She looked at McKenna. Don't they? McKenna met her gaze. We're not here for him, McKenna said quietly. We're here for you. Clarice's smile widened. For now, she said. The agents pulled her toward the door. Clarice looked back one last time. This isn't over, she said. Then she was gone. The door closed. Ethan lay there, his mind racing. McKenna stood silently. Is she right? Ethan asked quietly. McKenna turned to him. About what? About me, Ethan said. Am I just like her? McKenna was quiet for a moment. That's for you to decide, she said. Ethan's chest ached. What happens now? He asked. McKenna walked to the door. Now you heal, she said, and you figure out who you want to be when you're strong again. She paused. But there's something you should know. Ethan's pulse quickened. What? McKenna looked back at him. Clarice wasn't working alone, she said. And the person helping her is still out there. Ethan's blood ran cold. Who? McKenna's voice was quiet. Someone close. Someone you trust. She opened the door. And they're not done yet. The quiet ones see everything. Don't let this story fade. Someone needs to remember. McKenna left, and Ethan lay there, heart pounding. Clarice was gone, but the real threat was still here, still watching, still waiting. If federal agents were already here, what final move was Clarice still planning, and who was helping her finish it? Before the federal agents could take Clarice out, she straightened her shoulders. One last time. Her voice was ice. You don't have proof, she said. Suspicion isn't evidence. McKenna nodded slowly. That's why I waited. She turned to Ethan. Mr. Vale, McKenna said, do you remember the offshore account you didn't recognize 2 years ago? Ethan's breath caught. His mind raced back. 2 years ago. An account flagged during routine audits. Money he didn't authorize. He'd asked Clarice about it. She said it was a clerical error, a mistake by the accounting team. He believed her. You asked Clarice about it, McKenna continued. She said it was a clerical error. Clarice's face tightened. That's irrelevant, she snapped. McKenna shook her head. That account, she said calmly, funded the man who followed your car the night of the crash. The room exploded. Ethan's heart stopped. The lawyer gasped. The doctor's face went pale. Clarice lunged forward. That's a lie, she screamed. She reached for the recorder on the table. Security grabbed her arm, pulled her back. Let go of me, Clarice screamed, thrashing, but they held firm. McKenna didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, watching. Everything you moved left a trail, McKenna said quietly. You just assumed no one was walking behind you. Clarice's eyes filled with fury, wild, desperate. You think you won? She hissed. McKenna's voice was soft. No, she said. I think he survived. She looked at Ethan. Now speak. Ethan's throat burned. His whole body ached, but he forced the words out. Hoarse, broken, real. Why? One word, but it carried everything. 11 years of marriage, trust, love, partnership, all shattered. Clarice stared at him, her chest heaving, her eyes blazing. Why? She repeated, her voice shaking. Yes, Ethan whispered. Why did you try to erase me? Clarice laughed, a sound with no joy. Because I disappeared, she said, her voice cracking. Because your shadow swallowed me whole. Ethan flinched. "What are you talking about?" he rasped. Clarisse's face twisted with pain and rage. "I gave up everything for you," she said. "My career, my dreams, my identity." She took a shaky breath. "I became Mrs. Ethan Vale, and I stopped being Clarisse." Ethan's chest tightened. "I never asked you to—" "You didn't have to," Clarisse shouted. "That's the problem. You didn't even notice when I stopped existing." Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice stayed hard. "You didn't notice when I stopped painting, when I stopped seeing my friends, when I became nothing but an accessory to your empire." Ethan's heart broke. "I loved you," he whispered. Clarisse shook her head. "You loved control," she said bitterly. "You loved having the perfect wife, the perfect image, the perfect life." She looked around the room, at the agents, the lawyer, McKenna. "But you never loved me," she said quietly. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to say she was wrong, but deep down, a small voice whispered, "Was she right?" McKenna stepped forward. "Love doesn't justify murder," she said firmly. Clarisse turned to her. "I wasn't trying to kill him," she said. "I was trying to free myself." "By staging an accident?" McKenna asked. "By removing him from the equation," Clarisse said, "so I could finally breathe." The federal agent spoke up. "Mrs. Vale, you have the right to remain silent." "I don't want to be silent," Clarisse screamed. "I've been silent for 11 years. She looked at Ethan. "You want to know why?" she asked, her voice raw. "Because I woke up one day and realized I'd spent a decade building your dreams while mine died." Ethan's tears fell. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Clarisse laughed bitterly. "Sorry doesn't give me back my life." The agents moved to escort her out, but Clarisse wasn't done. "You think I'm the villain?" she asked. "Look in the mirror, Ethan. You erased me long before I tried to erase you." The words hit like a punch. Ethan couldn't breathe. Clarisse was led toward the door, but before she left, she turned back one last time. "And the person who helped me?" she said quietly. They felt the same way. Ethan's blood ran cold. "Who?" he demanded. Clarisse smiled. "Someone who knows exactly what it's like to be invisible in your world." The door closed. She was gone. Ethan lay there shaking. McKenna stood silently. "Who was she talking about?" Ethan asked, his voice breaking. McKenna looked at him. "Someone who had access to everything," she said. "Someone you trusted completely." Ethan's mind raced. His assistant? His lawyer? A board member? "Who?" he whispered desperately. McKenna's voice was quiet. "Someone who's been with you even longer than Clarisse." Ethan's heart stopped. Longer than Clarisse? That meant, "They're still here," McKenna said. "Still, close. Still watching." She walked to the door. "And they're not done yet." What reason could justify erasing the man she married, and who else felt invisible enough to help her do it? Clarisse laughed, a sound with no warmth, no joy, just emptiness. "Because I disappeared," she said, her voice breaking. "Because your shadow swallowed me whole." Ethan flinched. "What?" he whispered. Clarisse's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was pure rage. I gave up everything for you," she said. "My dreams, my life, my name." She took a shaky breath. "I was supposed to be an artist. Did you even know that?" Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't. "I had gallery shows lined up," Clarisse continued. "Commissions, a future." She laughed bitterly. "But then I married you, and suddenly I wasn't Clarisse anymore. I was Mrs. Ethan Vale." McKenna stood quietly in the corner, listening, watching. Clarisse's voice shook, not with sadness, with fury. "You didn't notice when I stopped painting," she said. "When I stopped seeing my friends, when I became nothing but a prop in your perfect life." Ethan's throat burned. I didn't ask you to give those things up, he said weakly. Clarice's eyes flashed. You didn't have to, she hissed. That's the problem. You didn't even notice when I stopped existing. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Suffocating. Ethan whispered, I loved you. Clarice shook her head. Slowly. No, she said. You loved control. Ethan's heart broke. That's not true. Isn't it? Clarice asked. You controlled everything, the money, the decisions, the image. I was just part of the package. She stepped closer. You didn't love me, Ethan. You loved having me. The words cut deep. Ethan wanted to deny it, wanted to fight back. But deep down, a voice whispered. Was she right? McKenna spoke gently. Love doesn't erase people. Clarice turned to her. No, she said coldly. Power does. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The federal agents entered. Clarice didn't fight, didn't scream. She just stood there, defeated. One of the agents pulled out handcuffs. Mrs. Vale, he said, hands behind your back. Clarice complied. Her eyes stayed locked on Ethan. As they cuffed her wrists, she spoke. You waking up ruined everything. Ethan's voice was soft, broken. No, he said. You trying to end me did. Clarice's jaw clenched. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, maybe we both failed each other. The agents began to lead her away, but before she reached the door, Clarice stopped, looked back one last time. I hope you find what you're looking for, she said quietly, because it wasn't me. Then she was gone. The door closed. Silence swallowed the room. Ethan lay there, tears streaming down his face. His body ached. His heart ached more. McKenna walked to his bedside. Are you okay? She asked gently. Ethan shook his head. No, he whispered. I don't think I am. McKenna nodded. You will be, she said. Eventually. Ethan looked at her. Was she right? He asked. Did I erase her? McKenna was quiet for a moment. That's not for me to answer, she said. Ethan closed his eyes. I didn't mean to, he whispered. Intent doesn't erase impact, McKenna said softly. Ethan's chest tightened. He thought about all the years, all the moments he missed, all the times Clarice tried to tell him. And he didn't listen. Sometimes love becomes poison slowly. If you've felt that weight, don't carry it alone. The door opened. A nurse entered. Mr. Vale needs rest, she said gently. McKenna nodded. She turned to leave, but Ethan called out. McKenna. She stopped. Thank you, he said, for everything. McKenna looked at him. Her expression was unreadable. Don't thank me yet, she said quietly. Ethan's pulse quickened. Huh, why not? McKenna glanced at the nurse, then back at Ethan. Because there's still one more truth you need to hear. Ethan's heart pounded. What truth? McKenna walked to the door. Paused. Clarice wasn't the one who planned the accident, she said. Ethan's blood ran cold. What? McKenna's voice was quiet. She was angry, desperate, but she didn't have the resources or the knowledge to pull something like that off. Ethan's mind raced. Then who did? McKenna looked at him. The person who helped her, she said. The one who had access to everything, your schedule, your routes, your weaknesses. Ethan's chest tightened. Who? He demanded. McKenna's eyes were sad. Someone who's been with you longer than anyone, she said. Someone you trust more than you trusted Clarice. Ethan's heart stopped. Tell me, he whispered desperately. McKenna shook her head. Not yet, she said. First you need to heal, because when you find out who it is, it's going to break you all over again. She opened the door. And this time, she said quietly, I won't be able to put you back together. She left. The door closed. Ethan lay there, his mind spinning. Who had been with him longer than Clarice? Who had access to everything? Who did he trust that much? His assistant had been with him for 15 years, his CFO for 12, his lawyer for nearly 2 decades. Any one of them could have done it. But which one? And why? With Clarice gone, what secret was McKenna still holding back? And who was the person Ethan trusted more than his own wife? The hospital felt different after Clarice was gone. Lighter. Like a weight had been lifted from the walls. Ethan recovered slowly. Each day brought small victories. His speech returned first. Words came easier, clearer, then movement followed. Fingers twitched, toes wiggled, arms lifted slightly. The doctors were amazed. "You're healing faster than we expected," one said. Ethan didn't tell them why. He had a reason to fight now. He had questions that needed answers. McKenna stayed close during his recovery. Not as a maid anymore, as a federal agent. But she still moved quietly. Still watched everything. One evening, after the nurses left, Ethan looked at her. "Why didn't you stop her earlier?" he asked. McKenna was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. She turned slowly. "What do you mean?" "You had evidence for years," Ethan said. "You could have arrested her any time. Why wait until I was almost dead?" McKenna was quiet for a moment, then she walked to his bedside. Sat down. "Because I needed her to expose herself," McKenna said quietly. "To make a move so big she couldn't deny it." Ethan nodded slowly. "And you needed me alive?" "Yes," McKenna said. "You were the only witness who could confirm what she was really planning." Ethan looked at her. "You risked my life," he said softly. "To get your case." McKenna met his gaze. "I did," she admitted. "And I won't apologize for that, because if I'd moved too soon, she would have walked, and she would have tried again." Ethan understood, but it still hurt. "I was never meant to save you," McKenna continued. "I was meant to give you the chance to save yourself." Ethan's chest tightened. "By waking up?" "By surviving," McKenna said, "and by choosing to tell the truth." Ethan looked down at his hands. They were shaking slightly. "What if I hadn't woken up?" he asked quietly. McKenna's voice was gentle. "Then I would have made sure she paid anyway." Ethan looked at her. "You risked everything," he said. 11 years undercover, your life, your identity." McKenna smiled faintly. "So did you." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't know what I was risking." "That makes you braver," McKenna said. Silence settled between them. Comfortable. Honest. Then McKenna stood. "I should go," she said. Ethan's chest tightened. "Where?" "I'll be reassigned," McKenna said. "My cover is gone. The case is closed." Ethan's heart sank. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked quietly. McKenna paused at the door, looked back at him. "Only if you stop overlooking the quiet people," she said. Ethan's throat burned. "I will," he whispered. "I promise." McKenna smiled, a real smile this time. "Good," she said. She opened the door. "McKenna," Ethan called out. She stopped. "What's your real name?" McKenna looked at him for a long moment. "Does it matter?" she asked gently. Ethan thought about it. "No," he said finally. "I guess it doesn't." McKenna nodded. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Vale." "Ethan," he said. "Just Ethan." McKenna's smile widened slightly. "Take care, Ethan." She left. The door closed behind her. Ethan lay there staring at the ceiling. Something settled inside him. A strange peace. He'd lost his wife, lost his trust, lost his sense of safety. But he'd gained something too. Clarity. The next morning, a nurse came in with his breakfast. "You're looking better," she said cheerfully. "I feel better," Ethan said. And he meant it. Later that day, his lawyer arrived. "We need to discuss next steps," the lawyer said. Clarice's trial. Asset protection. The foundation. Ethan nodded. There's one more thing, the lawyer said hesitantly. Ethan looked at him. What? The lawyer pulled out a folder. This was delivered this morning. From an anonymous source. Ethan took it, opened it. Inside was a single document, a bank transfer record from an account he didn't recognize to an account in Clarice's name. But what caught his attention was the signature authorizing the transfer. It wasn't Clarice's, it was someone else's, someone whose handwriting he knew. Ethan's blood ran cold. Who gave you this? He asked, his voice shaking. The lawyer shrugged. It was left at the front desk. No name. Ethan stared at the signature, his hands trembling. It couldn't be. But it was. The signature belonged to his CFO, Marcus Chen, the man who'd been with him for 12 years, the man he trusted with everything, the man who knew every detail of his business. Ethan's chest tightened. Marcus. It was Marcus all along. He looked up at the lawyer. Where is he? Ethan asked. The lawyer's face went pale. I don't know, he said. He called in sick this morning. No one's heard from him since. Ethan's heart pounded. Marcus knew. Somehow he knew they were onto him, and he was running. Ethan grabbed his phone, tried to call Marcus. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. Ethan looked at the lawyer. Find him, he said urgently. Now. The lawyer nodded and rushed out. Ethan sat there, his mind racing. Marcus had been with him longer than Clarice. Marcus had access to everything. Marcus knew his schedule, his routes, his vulnerabilities. Marcus could have orchestrated the entire thing. But why? Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He opened it. The message was short, simple, terrifying. You're not safe yet. M. Ethan's hands shook. M. Marcus. Or McKenna. Was McKenna truly gone? Or was her work still unfinished? The story broke nationwide the next morning. Headlines screamed across every news platform. Billionaire wakes. Wife arrested for conspiracy. America woke up to the scandal. Social media exploded. News anchors debated. Everyone had an opinion. Ethan watched from his hospital bed as his life became public entertainment. Within hours, everything started collapsing. The Vail Foundation froze all accounts. Board members resigned. Charities that depended on his funding scrambled for answers. Federal investigators widened their probe. Every transaction, every decision, every signature. Nothing was safe anymore. Ethan's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, business partners. Everyone wanted a statement. Everyone wanted answers. His PR team drafted something safe, professional, defensive. Ethan read it and shook his head. No, he said. I'm not hiding anymore. He wrote his own statement, short, honest, raw. I trusted the wrong silence, and I survived it. That was it. No excuses, no blame shifting, no legal jargon, just the truth. He posted it himself. The response was immediate. Messages poured in, some supportive. You're brave for speaking up. Thank you for being honest. We're praying for you. Others were cruel. You're just as guilty. You destroyed your own wife. Rich people always play the victim. Ethan read them all. Every single one. And he didn't respond with anger. He didn't defend himself. He just read. And learned. Because for the first time in his life, Ethan was listening. His lawyer called. Ethan, we need to discuss damage control. No, Ethan said calmly. We need to discuss the truth. The lawyer hesitated. What do you mean? I want a full audit, Ethan said, of everything. The foundation. My accounts. Every business deal I've ever made. That could take months, the lawyer said. And it could expose... Good, Ethan interrupted. Let it expose everything. I'm done hiding. The lawyer was silent. Are you sure about this? He asked finally. Yes, Ethan said. For the first time in my life, I'm sure. He hung up. Ethan didn't chase revenge. He didn't try to destroy Clarice publicly. He didn't play the victim. He chased clarity, and that terrified people, because a powerful man seeking truth instead of control was dangerous. One afternoon, Ethan returned to his office for the first time. The building felt different, quieter. Employees avoided eye contact. Whispers followed him down the hallway. He walked into his office and closed the door. On his desk sat a stack of documents, legal papers, financial reports, messages from the board, but one envelope stood out, small, plain, labeled simply, M. Ethan's heart skipped. He stared at it for a long moment, then picked it up. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, handwritten. The message was short. "You're awake now. Stay that way." No signature. Ethan read it twice, then smiled. A real smile. For the first time in weeks, McKenna. She was gone, but she was still watching, still protecting, still reminding him not to fall back asleep. Ethan folded the note carefully, placed it in his wallet, where he'd see it every day, a reminder. That night. Ethan sat alone in his apartment, the one he'd barely lived in because he was always working. He looked around at the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the view of the city, all the things he'd collected, all the things that meant nothing. He thought about Clarice's words. "You didn't notice when I stopped existing." And he realized. He hadn't noticed when he stopped existing either. He'd become his work, his empire, his reputation. But who was he without all that? Ethan didn't know, but he wanted to find out. Waking up isn't the victory. Staying awake is. If this mattered to you, make sure it matters to someone else. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Ethan's pulse quickened. He opened it. "Check your foundation's audit. Look at Project Cornerstone." M. Ethan's hands trembled. Project Cornerstone. He knew that name. It was one of the Foundation's biggest initiatives. Education funding for underprivileged communities, millions of dollars allocated every year. Why would McKenna want him to look at that? Ethan grabbed his laptop, logged into the Foundation's secure files, found the Cornerstone records, started reading. At first, everything looked normal. Donations, grants, distributions. Then he saw it. A pattern. Money going to schools that didn't exist. Addresses that led nowhere. Names that couldn't be verified. Someone had been funneling millions out of Cornerstone for years. But the signatures approving the transfers weren't Clarice's. They were his. Ethan's blood ran cold. Someone had been forging his signature, using his foundation to steal, and he never noticed. He scrolled further, found an internal memo from Marcus Chen, his CFO. The memo was 3 years old. It outlined efficiency improvements for Cornerstone, streamlining processes, reducing oversight. Ethan had signed off on it without a second thought, because he trusted Marcus. And Marcus had used that trust to build a perfect theft machine. Ethan's chest tightened. How much had been stolen? He ran the numbers. His hands shook as the total appeared on screen. $47 million. Gone. Over 5 years. And Ethan never knew. His phone buzzed again. Another text. "Marcus isn't running. He's waiting. Be careful." M. Ethan's heart stopped. Marcus was waiting? For what? Ethan stood up, walked to his window, looked out at the city, and realized Marcus had access to everything. His accounts, his passwords, his security codes. If Marcus wanted to finish what Clarice started, he could. Easily. What did McKenna know about Ethan that even he hadn't realized yet? And why was Marcus still waiting? 6 months later, Ethan stood in his old house, the one he'd shared with Clarice, the one where McKenna had worked for 11 years. Everything was quiet now. Empty. He walked slowly through the rooms, each one filled with memories he'd ignored. conversations he'd missed, signs he'd overlooked, the living room where Clarice made her calls, the office where she asked her questions, the hallway where McKenna stood, listening, watching, waiting. Ethan stopped in the kitchen. This was where McKenna used to hum, softly, while she cooked or cleaned. He never asked what song it was, never asked if she was happy, never asked anything, because she was just the maid, invisible. Ethan leaned against the counter and realized something painful. Power didn't blind him. Comfort did. He'd gotten so comfortable in his world, his control, his routine, his success, that he stopped paying attention. He stopped listening, stopped noticing, stopped asking questions, and that comfort almost killed him. Ethan closed his eyes. How many other people had he overlooked? How many voices had he silenced without even knowing? How many McKennas were still out there, invisible, because people like him refused to see them? The thought broke him, but it also rebuilt him. Ethan left the house that day and started making changes, real changes. He stepped down as CEO, appointed new leadership, people who weren't yes men, people who would challenge him, people who came from places he'd never been. He restructured the foundation, made it transparent, every dollar tracked, every decision public, no more offshore accounts, no more hidden transfers. He tore down the walls he'd built around his empire and invited people in, critics, auditors, community leaders, people who had been hurt by his blind spots, and he listened, really listened. At his first public board meeting, Ethan made a promise. "We will never ignore the quiet," he said. The room was silent. "The people who clean our offices, the people who cook our food, the people who work behind the scenes while we take credit." He paused. "Those are the people who see everything. And from now on, we listen to them." It wasn't a perfect speech. It wasn't polished or rehearsed, but it was honest, and people felt it. Slowly, Ethan started rebuilding. Not his empire, himself. He attended community meetings, visited the schools his foundation funded, met the people his money was supposed to help, and he asked questions. What do you need? What did we miss? How can we do better? For the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't trying to control the conversation. He was trying to understand it. One evening, he sat alone in his new apartment. Smaller, simpler. No expensive art, no floor-to-ceiling windows, just a place to live. He thought about everything that had happened. The accident, the betrayal, the lies. And he realized. Survival wasn't waking up. It was learning to hear before the silence became deadly. Ethan opened his laptop, checked his emails. One caught his eye. Subject: "You're still being watched." His heart stopped. He opened it. The message was short. "Marcus is still out there. He knows you found the money. He's planning something. Stay alert." Ethan's hands trembled. McKenna. She was still watching, still protecting, even from the shadows. But the message wasn't comforting. It was a warning. Marcus hadn't been caught yet. The federal investigation was ongoing, but Marcus had disappeared. No trace, no leads. And now, 6 months later, he was planning something. Ethan stood up, walked to his window, looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was watching him, waiting, planning. Ethan's phone buzzed. Another text, unknown number. He opened it. "Check your security system, now." Ethan's pulse spiked. He pulled up his home security app, scanned the cameras. Everything looked normal. Front door, hallway, living room. Then he saw it. Kitchen camera. A figure standing in the shadows. Just standing there, watching the camera. Ethan's blood ran cold. Someone was in his apartment. Right now. He grabbed his phone, started to dial 911, but another text came through. "Don't call the police. Go to the kitchen, alone." Ethan's heart pounded. This was insane. But if it was Marcus, calling the police might make things worse. He might run again. Disappear forever. Ethan took a deep breath. walked slowly toward the kitchen, his hands shaking. Every step felt like walking toward his own grave. He reached the doorway, stopped. "I know you're there," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. Silence, then a voice. Calm, familiar. "You've changed, Ethan." Ethan's chest tightened. He knew that voice. He stepped into the kitchen and froze. Standing there in the shadows was McKenna, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Marcus Chen, in handcuffs. McKenna looked at Ethan. "I told you I'd finish this," she said quietly. Marcus glared at Ethan. "You don't know what you've done," Marcus hissed. Ethan stared at him. "What I've done?" Ethan asked. "You stole from me. You tried to kill me." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I saved you," he said. Ethan's mind went blank. "What?" McKenna stepped forward. "He's not lying," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, confused. "Marcus wasn't trying to kill you," McKenna continued. "He was trying to stop Clarice." Ethan's world tilted. What? But was Ethan truly done being watched? And what did Marcus mean by saying he saved him? 1 year later, Ethan received a letter. No return address, just his name written in careful handwriting. He stood in his office, smaller now, more modest, and turned the envelope over in his hands. Something about it felt familiar. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single piece of paper. One line, handwritten. "Some truths only surface when you think no one is listening." Ethan smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. He walked to his window and looked out over the city. The same city he'd controlled for years. The same buildings, the same streets, the same skyline. But everything looked different now, because he was different. Alive, alert, aware. McKenna had vanished back into the quiet after Marcus's arrest. No goodbye, no final conversation. She just disappeared. Back into the shadows where she belonged, where she worked best. Ethan understood now. She was never meant to stay. Her job was to wake him up. And once he was awake, she moved on. To the next house, the next case, the next person who needed saving. That's who she was. A silent guardian, invisible by design, powerful by choice. Ethan had tried to find her, called the federal office, left messages, but they told him the same thing every time. Agent information is classified. He never learned her real name, never saw her face again, but he felt her presence in every decision he made, in every person he noticed, in every quiet voice he chose to hear. Ethan thought about everything he'd learned. The most dangerous people aren't loud. They're patient. They watch. They wait. They plan. Clarice had been patient. Marcus had been patient. And McKenna had been the most patient of all. 11 years. 11 years of watching, gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment. Most people would have given up, but not her, because she understood something. Ethan was only beginning to grasp. The people we overlook may be the only ones protecting us from ourselves. Ethan looked down at the letter again, read the line one more time. Some truths only surface when you think no one is listening. He thought about Marcus. How he'd been embezzling money, yes, but also how he'd been trying to gather evidence against Clarice. How he'd been the one who tipped off the federal investigation years ago. How he'd risked everything to stop her. Ethan had judged him too quickly, assumed the worst, because that's what he'd always done. Assumed. Controlled. Decided. Without listening. But not anymore. Now, Ethan led differently. He built a company where people weren't afraid to speak, where the janitor's opinion mattered as much as the board members, where transparency replaced secrecy. It wasn't easy. Some people left, said he'd gone soft, but others stayed and thrived because they finally felt seen. Ethan's phone buzzed, a reminder for his afternoon meeting. Community leaders, teachers, social workers. People who'd been doing the real work while he'd been chasing power. He grabbed his jacket. But before leaving, he looked at the letter one more time. Then he walked to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a simple wooden frame. He placed the letter inside and set it on his desk, right where he could see it every day. A reminder to never stop listening, to never stop seeing, to never fall back asleep. Ethan grabbed his keys and headed for the door, but as he reached for the handle, his phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. His heart skipped. He opened it. "You're doing good work, Ethan. Keep going. The world needs people who stay awake." Ethan's throat tightened. He typed back quickly. "Thank you. For everything." He waited. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a response. "Don't thank me. Just remember, the quiet ones are always watching. Stay safe." Ethan smiled, put his phone in his pocket, and walked out into the world, ready, aware, alive. If this story moved you, don't let it disappear. Subscribe, because sometimes survival begins the moment you start listening. Ethan knew his journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more betrayals, more moments of doubt, but he also knew he wasn't walking blind anymore. He'd learned to see the people others overlooked, to hear the voices others ignored, to value the quiet strength that held the world together. And in doing so, he'd found something more valuable than power. He'd found purpose. Months passed, the foundation grew, the company thrived, but Ethan stayed humble, stayed listening, stayed awake. One evening, he returned to his office late. Everyone had gone home. The building was quiet. He sat at his desk and looked at the framed letter. Some truths only surface when you think no one is listening. He thought about McKenna, about Clarice, about Marcus, about all the people who'd shaped his journey, and he understood. The truth wasn't just about them, it was about him. He'd been so focused on control that he'd stopped living, so focused on power that he'd stopped seeing, so focused on success that he'd forgotten what really mattered. People, connection, truth. Ethan closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life, he felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because he was finally awake, and he planned to stay that way. Ethan stood, turned off the lights, locked his office, and walked out into the night. The city stretched before him, full of people he'd never meet, stories he'd never know, lives unfolding in silence. But now, he knew they were there, and that made all the difference. He looked up at the sky, whispered quietly, "Thank you, McKenna, wherever you are." The wind carried his words away, and somewhere in the shadows of another city, another house, another life, McKenna smiled. Her work was never done. But moments like this made it worth it. She turned away from the window and disappeared back into the quiet, where she belonged. End.